Welcome to the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. This is a show about the past, present, and future of animation and all things related, hosted by former Disney animators, directors, and authors Tom Bancroft and Tony Bancroft. This podcast is sponsored by TaughtByAPro.com, the place on the web to watch art instruction videos by the top pros in comics, animation, character design, and concept art. This is the big one. The Bancroft Brothers are honored to sit down with the legendary creator of Ariel, Beast, Aladdin, and Tarzan, among others. In the 70s, Glen Keane came to Disney Animation as the torch was passed from the 9 old men. And for the last 40 years, he ran with it like no other. We discuss his newest short, Duet, where he came from, what he's doing now, and where he's headed, and even answer some of your questions. So hold on tight. And now, here's the Bancroft Brothers.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast.
What?
I think Tom just blew out my ears there.
It was my turn to scream.
Yeah, I'm usually the screamer, but this time Tom screamed it out. We're glad to be back. Thank you so very much for joining us in our last podcast. We're really trying to get on a really good track of being out every 2 weeks with either Tom and I talking on a podcast about what's new in animation or bringing to you an interview with a special guest.
We're on a Dos Weekos. That's the Spanish version.
Dos Weekos.
Schedule.
We come out every 2 weeks. Join us on iTunes or the TaughtByAPro.com site where you can find our podcast there too. And Tom, I got to say, I'm excited.
You say that every time.
I do. I say it because it's true, but none more
what level?
than today.
What level are you at this
today.
time?
There's a 10 for me of an excitement level. Because
I'm 110. This is awesome.
Because of our special guest today. And I'm going to let you go for it. Introduce our special guest.
Well, let's introduce him and then I'll do a quick bio. But I just want to tell everybody right now that we have in the house, listening to us talk, Glen Keane.
Hey, Glen!
Hello, Glen.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's great to be with the Bancroft Brothers.
Oh, it is our honor to have you. And we had to bring you in because I hate to have you hear my voice and not have people hear you. So welcome to the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast.
It's an honor to be here. I'm sorry it took so long to get me on here, but I'm here.
Well, we have been trying for some time. I got to tell you, Glen, and people that listen to our podcast faithfully know this. Practically every single podcast, we bring up Glen Keane. There's always some kind of reference. I mean, they're not always good references. Sometimes they're negative. But no.
No, they're always positive.
They're
Tony,
always positive references. We always have good stories about you and how you've influenced our lives. We've done Aaron Blaze, and Aaron went on and on about working with you. He loves you so much, and so we had a good Glen Keane riff on that one. But we've been talking about you so much, we thought we got to get you on the show. So we're so happy that you're able to join us today.
Thank you.
And you're one of the reasons we're here. We're both huge fans, and also, of course, friends with you, and have learned so much from you, directly and indirectly.
There's nothing I enjoy more than hanging out with animation friends, and let's enjoy the next hour.
Yeah,
you got it. We're gonna have some fun, and I'm gonna start right now with a little bio just to embarrass you. But in case you don't know Glen Keane,
if you were born on the opposite side of the moon,
right? I don't understand that, because why would you be listening to this podcast and not know who he is? But here's a little rundown, and I'm not gonna go through everything because you have an extensive. How many years in animation?
40.
40 years. Oh my gosh.
40 years.
That's like how old I am, practically. Okay. I'm a little older. Okay, but I see you started at Disney on The Rescuers, the original one. We got Pete's Dragon, Fox and the Hound, Mickey's Christmas Carol. Just a quick aside, when Tony and I were at CalArts, you guys were in the middle of Oliver and Company. But an even bigger influence was the movie that had just come out before that, which was Mickey's Christmas Carol, and you'd done the giant in Mickey's Christmas Carol. And I remember all of us at CalArts were just huge geeks because it was this fun, cartoony animation that you did on that. So I had to do a little shout out for the giant.
Cool.
We got Black Cauldron, Great Mouse Detective, and you did Ratigan in that.
Oh, love it.
Chipmunk Adventure, Oliver and Company, Little Mermaid, of course. You did Ariel. Rescuers Down Under. Oh, and you did The Eagle, of course, and Cody. Beauty and the Beast, you did Beast. Aladdin, you did Aladdin. Pocahontas, you did Pocahontas. Is this getting repetitive? Tarzan, you did Tarzan. Treasure Planet, you did John Silver. Tangled, of course, you're the animation supervisor of Tangled. Paperman, you did character design. And Duet, the newest short that you just did, has just come out. and everybody loves it.
Yeah.
You directed and animated it.
And he's a Disney legend, Tom. This guy is a Disney legend that we have on the show today.
I think it's our first.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is Don Hahn a Disney legend?
No, not yet. But Floyd Norman, we'll get him.
I guess it all depends on what the word legend means. Those guys are legends, whether they got the award or not yet.
Wow. Well, you just got a new award for most humble.
Well, again, welcome to the show, Glenn. And this is awesome because you're part of everyone's childhood in a lot of ways. Anybody that grew up with animation knows those lead characters so very well. And I can't wait to talk to you more about that. I'm going to embarrass you too now. We actually brought you on the show just to talk over you now.
Just let me know when you got something for me to say, and I'll. All
right, now be quiet while Tony goes.
I wanted to tell you too that for me it's a real privilege to have you on the show because we worked together on several different films, from Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. While Tom was in Florida, I was in California. You were right down the hall from me, but we never really worked together on any of the same characters. But we did share one scene, and I want to know if you know what that is. We shared one scene that I animated and you animated together.
Oh boy!
Don't do this to him.
I don't remember which one it was.
All right.
Fill me in. Sorry.
All right. It was on Beauty and the Beast. And it was my second scene on the movie. It was a scene where Belle is refusing to come downstairs to eat supper with the Beast. So he tears up the stairs after her. And it was a long shot of Beast as he goes up the stairs. And I did those three Microsoft, like booger size, like little Cogsworth, Lumiere, and Mrs. Potts running after him saying, "Stop, stop."
Glenn, why didn't you remember that awesome scene?
Well, I mean, I should have, because without those little tiny characters, the scale would have been totally ruined. It could have looked like a mouse going up those stairs. But thanks to you, he was the Beast.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
He's like Glenn is the most humble, awesome person. He just found a way to compliment you on this little booger animation. I love that.
Yeah, well, I was still an animated assistant at the time. I hadn't been promoted to full animator, so that was one of my, animated assistant scenes that I got. They, animated assistants, for those that don't know, get a lot of the kind of the smaller scenes or background characters and things like that.
Crowd shots.
Crowd shots, yeah.
Tony, how did you feel animating that shot?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I put my all into it. I really did because, well, one, there was the pressure of following you up. You had already done Beast, since he was the primary force in acting, or the character that was leading the scene.
Setting the pace.
And of course, I love
Literally.
to I had your stack of scenes at my desk, or your stack of drawings, and I would roll through them and get inspired by it. And I thought, how am I going to get that kind of power and that passion into my little characters? But man, I worked hard to try and just match that level as best I could with my little guys.
You could have drawn him a little more furry.
Yeah. I remember that shot because it was one of those times where you just are hanging on to the character, letting the character just be them.
Right.
And Beast is running up those stairs, and I started him running up the stairs, and I thought, what the heck am I doing? Why would he go up the stairs? He just leaped that huge gap, and I just to let him just jump. I didn't know he was going to do that, but as you're animating, you just suddenly realize you're in the head of the character. You start thinking like they're thinking, and they're going to just do what they do. I love it when you're just hanging onto the pencil and the character is living. But I gotta say, I'm really happy to hear that your approach is to just make the most of whatever shot you had, and it's why you are who you are, because you didn't look at it like as just some stepping stone to finally get to do something that was real.
Yeah. Because
that was real. Those characters were no less real than Beast was. They had their emotions, and I remember giving scenes sometimes to different people that I would have on my team, and you'd hand a smaller shot like that, and I could see it in the animator's eyes, like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, what, dude? How could you? This is the character's living and they're walking down the street. I mean, discover what it is about movement, and the joy of a walk is incredible. If you can just capture that, this is like capturing lightning in a bottle if you could animate it. And
yeah,
I mean, I've always wanted to just animate somebody walking down a crowded sidewalk with so many people walking past and everybody busy thinking, lost in their own purpose in life and crossing over, and you have to dodge people moving in and out. It would just be the coolest thing.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and each one have their own walk and their own style of walk because of their personality. I remember trying to get that with those little characters was, how would Cogsworth hit those stairs at a fast pace? And Lumiere's got to bounce up the stairs, so how does he keep up? And who's last? Is it Mrs. Potts because she's a little heavier,
Yeah.
So I remember thinking about all those things.
Well, and I know that, I've been really, it's more than just like an idle wish, because I find myself when I am in a crowded sidewalk, I get my iPhone and I put it on play and I just walk down and I'm just filming, kind of thinking, all right, I'm set. I've got all the material here. One of these days I'm going to do this.
That's very inspirational. I don't know. That's amazing you turned that into a teachable moment. Here's my little story. Okay, now you and I did work together on Pocahontas. I was one of the animators on Pocahontas, but it was long distance. So we really didn't get a chance to get to know each other that well because of the distance. There was one moment I remember, and this one's a little more embarrassing. This personal story is that toward myself, but a few years after Pocahontas, you'd come home from Paris. You were coming home after doing Tarzan, and you stopped by the Disney Florida studio. I don't know if you remember this, but you were just there for, I think, a few hours or a day, and you were in Aaron Blaze's office, and you were talking to him and kind of reminiscing, and you guys had worked together on Beauty and the Beast, and you were talking about like painting, and he had his sketchbooks out, his like watercolor, beautiful sketchbooks of birds and stuff and bears and you're talking about that and painting and trips that you've gone on, and then I come in and I'm like, hey Glenn, how you doing? I just wanted to say hi, and I'm being all geeky fanboy, and I have a sketchbook with me, and you go, oh great Tom, hey let me look at that, and you grab the sketchbook and you start to look at it, you're like, and you open it up and you see all these other drawings by other comic book and animator artists and stuff, none of my stuff, and you go, oh, it's that kind of sketchbook. And I was just like,
drawing.
Oh my gosh. I was being a fanboy, and you're like all in this, hey, let's compare sketchbooks. And I don't know. I just
Tom
felt
became
like,
one of those animators where you just rolled your eyes and said, oh.
all right,
Yeah,
give it to me.
I'm sure you could have grabbed another one that had all of the kind of sketches that I was thinking I was going to see.
I have a ton of those. Yeah, I have a ton of them. Yeah, crates full. But yeah, no, you were nice enough. You did me a great Tarzan drawing that day. So I got over my embarrassment.
Well, I would not have drawn it in your own sketchbook. I don't really like to do that kind of invade somebody else's territory.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I appreciate you doing that for me, but that was my embarrassing moment.
Let's go back to the beginning for you, Glenn. We all went to CalArts, but you were like, I don't know, class number 1 of the character animation program. What was that like for you? I know you grew up with a father who was an artist and you wanted to be, how did you find out about CalArts, and where did that begin for you, and being part of that first class? What did that mean for you?
Well, I wasn't part of the first class. That happened after me.
Oh.
I was, at that time, I wanted to just play football for Arizona State in high school or go to art school. And I had an opportunity to go play football, and I was struggling with that for a little bit. Football I loved, but drawing was just something I couldn't not do. I just couldn't not do it. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, my dad and I would always go with him to the art store and hang out with him with different artists and just go into his studio, and which was sort of like a sacred place for me. I remember going out there at night and knocking on his studio door, and you'd hear him say, "Come in." And I'd walk in and immediately just smell this wonderful incense of pencil shavings and pipe tobacco. And it was just absolutely wonderful, and dreamed of being like him. And Dad was a phenomenal fine artist, but he never saw himself as a fine artist.
Really?
Yeah, his watercolors were absolutely beautiful.
Oh.
But he would always say, Glenn, I'm a cartoonist. You're an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And to reinforce that, he would give me, like, I remember he gave me these little cavemen toys. And he said, no, here's some of these little cavemen. You should draw them and look at the anatomy on them. And then he would give me Bern Hogarth's book, Dynamic Anatomy, in 4th grade.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was drawing, and I just approached drawing from a very classical way. And I remember going to school on the school bus at the time in 4th grade with all these drawings, these figure drawings, and other kids looking at my sketchbook and going, "Hey, Keane's drawing naked guys." I realized, okay, so I'm not like everybody else, but that's okay. It was the constant thread through my life was drawing, and so when I decided, okay, I'm going to go to Cal Arts, my dad and I drove out to Cal Arts with my portfolio. Now, Dad was not a very sophisticated artist in a sense of he had never gone to art school, never taken any training.
Oh, he's self-taught.
Yeah, just self-taught. So we drove out, but the school was closed. It's Easter weekend. It was in '72. So I'm thinking, oh, man. Well, I guess Dad should have called ahead. He didn't know school's closed or whatever. So we got my portfolio, though, and we're driving down past the dorm. This kind of spacey student is walking across, and Dad says, "Excuse me, young man." And I'm like, "Oh, no, Dad, no, don't." And this guy comes over, "Yeah, man." He's like, "Look, my son wants to go here to Cal Arts, but the school's closed." "Yeah, the school's closed." I said, "That's right. Look, he wants to go to the art school, and he's got this painting, this portfolio of paintings, and would you drop it off?" And he takes the portfolio.
Give your portfolio to a stoner. Oh, nice.
And he gave the portfolio to this kid.
Oh, all your originals too, right?
Yeah, all the originals. And so we drove away. And I'm thinking, I can't believe we did that. Well, okay, Dad knows best, Father knows best. So I'm waiting about a month later, I get a acceptance letter from Cal Arts, and I'm accepted into the School of Film Graphics. Oh, that idiot, he dropped it off at the wrong school. So
I don't want to be a filmmaker.
I had no idea what film graphics was.
Oh, that was Jules Engel's group, right?
Yeah, it was Jules Engel. I had not thought of animation or anything at all. So what I did was I called the school and to talk to admissions and said, "Excuse me, I think there's a mistake. I've been accepted into the School of Painting. I've been accepted into the School of Film Graphics. I wanted to get in the School of Painting, and can I get out of that?" And the lady said, "Well, no, I'm sorry. This is the only way that you're going to come into the school is through film graphics." I said, "Well, what is film graphics? I don't even know what it is." She said, "Well, it's, actually, I have no idea." Nobody knew what film graphics was.
That sounds like Cal Arts. Yeah,
at that time. So, all right, well, maybe I'll just do a second in painting. And so I got there, and I remember the first day of class going down to A115, and there's all these people at these desks with the discs, and they're flipping and they're drawing paper, on paper, and it's like, what in the world is this? But then sitting down and doing this bouncing ball and feeling gravity, feeling weight, push, and that ball floating in the air, and I immediately started throwing a shadow on the ground under the ball and throwing a shadow on the underside of the ball, and then I had a parachute that I attached to it, and as the ball would drop, it kind of sprang up and back as it rotated, and I had stripes that I painted or drew on it, and so it turned in space, and it was so dimensional and real. And when I, as a kid, would draw, I wouldn't draw to do a drawing. I would draw to make the paper go away, and so it was a real world I was stepping into, and I just felt like I was consumed, and suddenly I was into this animation world, and the idea of sculptural drawing, all of that, the taste of it was there on that first day.
And 2 days later, you were teaching the class.
No, I didn't fit in with the class very, very well at all. I didn't know what end was up there. They didn't, at that time at Cal Arts, they didn't have a figure drawing class. They weren't teaching any principles of drawing and design, and after 2 years, I was really seriously lost.
Wow.
Huh.
And from what I was hearing, was that Disney was a closed door. There was no way you could ever get into Disney. That pretty much it was the end of classical animation. Well, at that time, I didn't know it, but they started a training program. And one day at Cal Arts, Don Bluth, John Pomeroy, and a few others came down and showed some rough animation. Andy Gaskell, Dick Sebast, and they showed some rough trainee tests they were working on. And I thought that I could never work at Disney because I drew in a real rough way. And I'd seen Sleeping Beauty, and I just thought, this is like
Oh, right.
trying to imagine leaping to the moon. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And when I saw that rough animation, sometimes something you just connect deep in your soul with something, and I can do that. I know I can do that. And so I started to develop a portfolio to get into Disney. But I don't know, it may seem like I'm pretty self-confident kind of a person, but when it comes to art and drawing, I feel like I'm always just staying ahead of somebody discovering I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Wait, are you talking about now in your life? Even now?
I feel that way right now. I do.
I think so many of us feel that way.
Yeah, no, I always know just enough to do what I'm doing, but never enough to do more.
Well, Glenn, the whole internet just threw up. So we're not going to cry you a river. That's horrible.
Well,
no, you're so humble.
When I went to get my portfolio together, though, even though I saw that animation and it just spoke to me, the young guys that were doing that. When it came time for me to draw and animate, I just thought, but I don't know how to do that. And so I reverted back to finely rendered, shaded drawings of backgrounds, houses, streets, trees, landscapes, and paintings. I thought maybe I could be a background painter, I could be a layout artist, but I knew that I didn't know how to do that kind of animation, even though it spoke to me. And so I brought in all this portfolio to show to Eric Larson, and he just went through the portfolio like page after page, faster and faster and faster, and and I'm saying, I spent 3 months on that drawing. And he stopped on this one sketch that I wasn't even going to put in there. It took me maybe 7 seconds to draw. It was a figurative drawing, like a Matisse drawing.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but it was one of those things like, yeah, but this is really, this could really just blow the whole thing. Like, they're going to look at it and go, well, we would have hired you except you put that drawing in there. No way.
That little scribble. Yeah.
Eric stopped on that one. He looked at it and I'm like, oh no. And then he kept going to the end. And then he went back to it. It's like, oh man, he's looking at it thinking, this is the worst drawing I've ever seen. But instead he said, can you do more like this? So, well, yeah. I wasn't even, yeah, that's easy. Because if you can draw more like this, maybe there's a place for you here at Disney. So that's when I went out to the beach and I got 7 notebooks, 100 pages in each one, and filled up these notebooks with guys throwing the frisbees and running around and at the zoo and dogs and everything I could draw, and came back a week later with the 700 drawings, and Eric went through.
A week later with 700 drawings.
Yeah, it's not hard to fill up and do 700 drawings when you are motivated. You don't have a job and you're 20 years old. It's just a lot of energy that just boom goes into that. And out of that, I remember Eric going through that and in a sketchbook just tearing out drawings. And he tore out at least 90 drawings out of each of those 100 and kept 10. He said, well, this is a pretty good average, 1 out of 10. We'll keep those. And so maybe he's thinking about Milt and his impatience, and he wasn't going to put too many drawings in front of him. But anyway, from that I was hired and started my first 4-week training with Eric. But your question was about CalArts. So I had none of the training that I was so envious of when I saw what animators like you guys and others that came in to CalArts. You were at so much higher of a level than I ever was at that point. And it was one of the things that was the most humbling to me is anytime I would go to look at CalArts films, because I was now at Disney and I was part of like the review board hiring people. But the drawings that I was seeing were so much better than anything I could have dreamed of doing. When I was there, I would always feel like, oh man, it's such a challenge to just never feel like you've arrived when you are seeing younger people that are doing things stronger, more natural than you could do. But then you'd ask those people to work with you, and they would push you. People like Tim Burton and John Musker and other Chris Buck and animators that were just so natural in their drawing.
Yeah, Rob Minkoff was like
Rob Minkoff,
Jerry Reese, all those guys.
These people have perfect animator pitch. They have perfect pitch.
Glenn, that was great to hear you say that, because I know for myself, hearing you say, oh, seeing the young guys come up just was so intimidating, and seeing their ability. And I mean, we all feel that way.
Yeah.
I know everybody that's listening to this has felt that way about the people coming up. That's inspirational for me just to hear that.
Well, and the other thing that I wanted to touch on in that story, because there was just so much there as you were retelling the story of your journey, is that I think the listeners that are with us right now, most of them are students. Most of them are coming up in animation, learning animation right now. They're in colleges all around the world, and they all feel what you felt, and the same thing that Tom and I felt too when we were at CalArts, which is, oh, the industry's not doing too well right now. There was a lot of uncertainty. I'm going to be going through all these courses and learning all this stuff. Will I even get a job? All those things I hear you say you felt way back then, we felt when we were doing it, and now kids today are feeling the same way. I love that it's all cyclical, though, that these things come around and everybody goes through a lot of the same stuff, but don't let it stop you. It didn't stop you, obviously.
Well, it's still not stopping me now. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
Even at 60 years old, I literally feel in a lot of ways like I did at 20, just starting. I mean, it was stepping away from Disney and into a world where it seems that there are no rules any longer.
Yeah.
Disney was a very structured place, a way of telling stories, a way of doing animation. The principles, everything was very structured. And I'm finding that the world of animation is being reinvented. And you can't just rely on what you've done in the past, though you learn from it. But there's still, the thing that you really are relying on is that same fire in your heart that drove you way back then to not listen to those people that said, there's really no future in animation. You'd be a lot better if you just got into investing or go to medical school or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You just have to follow that passion of drawing. That's that's who you are.
Well, that's what I tell people is that I relate being an artist kind of like being a pastor of a church. You know that it's a calling. I mean, it's something that you have to do. It's not something you may even want to do because it's going to be a hardship. There's going to be a struggle. It's going to be basically every day trying to get better and working at it and probably being underpaid and all the things that go with being an artist. But it's a part of you. You really don't have a choice. I tell people I've lost so many jobs that weren't art jobs because I couldn't do them. I was a file clerk and I was a security guard, believe it or not.
Tom worked at Winchell's Donuts and he got fired from Winchell's Donuts. I'm just going to throw that out. Okay.
Hey, now. I walked from that
sorry,
one.
you didn't want to tell that part?
I walked away from that one.
You walked away, but it was the money from the cash register in your pocket. That was the money.
Yeah.
Maybe you should have walked away with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got fired from a pizza delivery job too. So.
Well, yeah, we tend to be distracted type people, us artists, I think. But let's keep going with that because, you were talking about how it is today. And we all know that you left Disney not that long ago, right? After, 37 years there? You left in 2012?
Yeah.
Can you say what made you leave? And then also, what's it been like on the outside now for you?
Yeah, I guess I got to back up a little bit and just remind you that for me, the idea that my portfolio was sent to the wrong school was never just something I brushed over. I never just felt that, that was a mistake. I was pursuing this path of fine art. I never felt that. I always felt like, no, that is who I am. And that's still the thing that I might do. And someday I'm going to become the artist that I dream of. And I never left that. And so that when I got to Disney, that was still my goal. And I felt that somehow I had to learn to draw and understand what I drew in a deep way that went way beyond learning how to construct, animated forms and to figure out a formula for drawing an animated face or something. To me, it was always about the bone structure. It was always about the design in anatomy. It was about the beauty of a French curve in a femur. I would be animating, and pretty soon I would just have to put aside the animation and start to just draw the wonder of the basin of a pelvis and how the trochanter fits into this femur and the beautiful design and the rhythm to it. And I had an in-betweener working for me named Jesus Cortez. And Jesus didn't have that animator sort of motion and fluidity of his drawing, but he had the most beautiful natural sense of anatomy and figure drawing that he would draw from life. He'd go to farmer's market and just draw on the weekend. He'd come in. So I would go over, do its corrections on his in-betweens, and then I put that aside. Okay, now we got that over. Here's my drawings. I want you to draw over top of these drawings and show me what the heck I'm doing wrong, because I'd be trying to do like I try to imitate a Lautrec drawing or Degas or something. And so he'd sit down, and now first he was standing behind me.
Yeah.
And then I have Jesus sitting there drawing over top of mine, and those drawings I've kept, and they are just so beautiful, and they still stand to me as kind of like the pinnacle of knowledge of drawing. Such a humble guy too. And so I've always hung on to that sense that I will stay here as long as that fire to like learn and discover something new is going. And there was always a character that called to me, like Ratigan. I mean, that was like the coolest thing. But I left after 10 years to go work at home and maybe find that pursuit. But before long, I was back again, and I was doing The Little Mermaid. But I always kind of honestly had one foot out the door. Huh. And I never felt like a Disney guy. People would always say, oh, you kind of represent Disney. It's like, yeah, but if you knew the way I don't feel like I'm a Disney guy. I've done characters that I absolutely am so thankful for that I got to animate, but this is a real quest to understand character and crawl into the emotions, and that's why I'm doing this.
Yeah, so for you, was it a feeling of, if I kind of settle on just drawing these cartoon characters for the rest of my life, I won't be able to achieve that higher goal of being an artist, a fine artist? Is that what it was? A drive to find that inner fine artist in you?
Yeah, I don't want to sound too like, artsy fartsy that way, but I do feel like even if it's a really broad character, Ratigan was a very broad character, but
sure,
you're still animating this deep conviction. It's like this guy was. I love to hate that guy, and it was such joy in drawing the power, and what he was trying to contain finally exploded out of him as he turned into this rat in the end. I love that reverse transformation of Beauty and the Beast. It was Ratigan, and to do that in the opposite way with the Beast, these are things that kept leading me on. And Rapunzel was a film that I'd started to think about in 1996.
Yeah.
So when it finally came out in 2010, I had already put in 14 years of thinking about that and longing for that. And it was a very long, difficult journey. And by the end of that, I really loved the whole experience of drawing over top of the animator's animation and sharing the things that Ollie would teach me. I remember Ollie saying back then, Glenn, I'm going to tell you something, but I don't think you're ready to learn it now. You're not going to understand it. Well, tell it to me anyway. Yes, I'm going to tell it to you anyway. But don't draw what the character is doing. Draw what the character is thinking. And I'd write that down. And I'd look at that and go, that's awesome. What the heck does that mean?
That's the best thing I've ever heard. But what does it mean?
No idea what that means. But working on Tangled, these moments just came back. I remember at a certain moment I was drawing over, I think it was a Becky Breezy scene where Rapunzel is caught, her hair is caught on some log and Mother Gothel's after her, and she's trying to get away, and I was drawing over top of it, and as I was drawing over top of it, I'm trying to strengthen the pose, and Ollie's words came into my mind, and I said it. I said, no, Ollie said, don't draw what the character's doing. Draw what the character's thinking. The moments like that were just sort of like, they're all impromptu and they're just happening. And I said, so what's she thinking? She doesn't want to be here. She wants to get out of here. She wants to go screen left. And I realized her focus is all on where the hair is caught. But why don't we have her look where she wants to go? Because that's what she's thinking. And so I drew some drawings of her looking off that direction. And it just suddenly became about a character who knew where she wanted to go and couldn't get there. And it was so much more powerful. And just that little drawing. And there were a lot of different moments like that. And I really enjoyed that. But I don't know, maybe it's when you start to get close to 60 or something, you start thinking, okay, I know I've got a lot of energy left, but I have to believe that animation is something that has not yet been explored.
Right.
I've always wondered if Rodin was alive today, or if Degas was alive today, and you did not show them any animated feature, nothing that was done today. And you just gave them this art form and said, okay, you can move your characters, you can draw, everything is possible. You don't need to do on cells any longer. Everything is, all the technology today, what would they do? Where would they take it? And I feel like, oh, there's something out there. I don't know what, I've got to go and start to explore that. And so leaving was more of a step into the unknown in a way that I was really excited about it, prayed a lot about it. I think I got away pretty much every day for at least a year before walking and just seeking what God's will was for me. And I felt like, I really need to do this. So I did. I left, and my wife, fortunately, was behind me, which was a great statement of her love to go with me on that journey, because it was a security and everything at Disney. And I mean, it was going wonderful. So we left, and I made the rounds of a lot of different studios, but something didn't feel right about joining a big studio. And I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. I had a couple ideas, though. They're cooking. And that's when we had a guys' night out with John Cars, Doug Sweetland, Rodrigo Blas, and myself down in Venice Beach. At a dinner, we had dinner there, and Doug Sweetland was just talking about this animation he was doing for this interactive device, and it was this virtual world. And I was like, "What the heck are you talking about, Doug?" He's like, "Well, you got to see it. I mean, and maybe you would be good at doing this. Maybe you should do it." And so before I knew it, I'd been invited up by Jan Pinkova up to meet Regina Dugan, who headed up a research division up at Google called ATAP. And it was a pretty amazing place. And they showed me this device that Jan had directed Windy Day, this short little film. And at first I thought, well, that's a really tiny looking screen. Yeah. Why do I want to...
It's a little phone, right? Yeah, it's on a phone.
Why would I want to trade in the big movie screen for that? And then the more I looked at it, I realized, well, it's not a screen at all. It's a window into an infinite world. It's the largest screen you could possibly have. And very intimate, and it's in your palm of your hand. And you've got the freedom to turn and look and follow the characters wherever they go. I said to Regina, well, Regina, what do you want me to do with this? And she said, we just want you to make something beautiful and emotional.
Wow.
No, they were talking to the right guy.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I was like, okay, yeah, but I don't really believe that. I mean, so what are you selling? And, sort of what's the catch? Yeah. And she said, well, there is no catch. We're not selling anything. This is going to be a gift. And actually, today or yesterday arrived on phones as a gift. This is a gift, and what we are asking from you is to you push yourself creatively, and that will push us technologically. And I've always found that anytime the computer has crossed my path, it's forced me to be a better artist, from Tarzan or Silver or the Wild Things animation, all that. So I said, yeah, let me come up with an idea for this, and then that's where Duet developed up from that.
So was that kind of scary, or was that an awesome challenge for you to be just given that kind of room? Just make a film for us that's emotional, that explores this technology, have fun with it, just put your passions out there. Was that mind-boggling for you, or incredibly freeing as an artist?
Well, it was incredibly freeing, and Regina was true to her word. We never had a pitch. We never had to present to anybody to get a green light on anything. But I did have to come up with an idea, and it's funny. I mean, you dream of that, and suddenly it's there. And it reminded me of we had this finch at home. And he was always squeezing out of the bars of the bird cage. And I'd always see him flying around. He'd be up in the curtains, up at the windows, and I'd grab him and put him back in the cage. And, he's happy, he'd sing, but he'd always fly out again. One day I came out and he's like, okay, he's gone. But I saw that one of the kids left the door to the outside open. Oh, man. I looked out on the lawn, and there's the bird. This little finch sitting on the grass, and his wings are just shaking. He's because for him, all he had known was the ceiling, and he thought, I'll get out and there'll be a bigger scene. Well, this was infinity, and he didn't know quite how to handle it. So I picked him up and put him back in the cage. Felt kind of bad about that, but he was comfortable there. But for me, I was not going to be comfortable any longer. But after I left Google up in the Silicon Valley, I came back to Lake Arrowhead, where we have a house, a studio up there. And for 3 weeks, I started to develop an idea. And what you were saying, Tony, about the freedom. I did feel freedom at the beginning, and I started to develop these ideas, and I followed kind of the prescribed path for developing an idea. I got all my note cards, different colored note cards.
There you go. Yeah.
And I started to write the conflict of the character, what the beginning, middle, and end, what the character wants, different ideas, and put them all up. And by the end of 3 weeks, I was so lost. I felt so worthless and stupid and like, why is everybody else able to do this and not me?
Doubts and fears started coming in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was it because it was too open-ended?
No.
Was that what was throwing you?
You were putting yourself in a hole, right?
Well, I think it's because I'm me, and I didn't quite know how to be me. I mean, despite the fact that I'd worked at Disney for such a long time, I knew that my approach typically was never the same as anybody else's in developing a story or sequences, and it was a much more personal journey. But for some reason, when it came down to it, I still went back to the version that is the proper version. And anyway, I called, I'd had my son Max. I was thinking maybe he could help me, and Jenny Rim, who was managing the animators at Disney, and she had left and started a gallery, and I was thinking maybe she could come and help me work on this. And Jenny had always kept saying, Glenn, just use your superpowers, which is drawing. Just draw. Yeah. And Max said, well, Dad, when was the last time you just animated just for the sheer joy of just animating? Yeah. I'm thinking, man, I don't know. That was a long time ago, like 10 years ago. Because, I worked on little pieces here and there, but he said, I would think you should just animate and not worry about whether it's going to be good for Google or anybody else. Just do it. And he said, I just personally would really like to see what it is. It's funny how you need your son to tell you something that you know already, that you need permission. Yeah. But I did that. I just started animating, and immediately the well just started pumping Duet up. I knew that I'd been thinking about the birth of a child and the purpose of life, the design of every human being, and I started animating this baby crawling, and pretty soon, I'm calling Max and Jenny, come up here, we've got 1 week, I got to present this to Google to show them what we're doing, I need your help, come up. They came up, and the ideas just started rolling, flowing. At one point I looked over and Max had taken some of my drawings, and he said, what do you think of this? And I looked, and he'd taken the line and he'd floated it off the page and put an atmosphere around it, and it was light, and yet all the graphite, it was sparkling with energy, and I was like, gosh, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We've got to this is the way we're going to do this. And so I was just animating, and we animated, about 50 seconds in a week there. And at one point, though, I didn't quite know how to begin this, and I remember 2 years before, at least 2 years before, I'd animated late at night at home. I think it was one of those moments that I just felt like I had to animate just for the fun of it, which I'd forgotten when Max asked me. And I'd animated this baby just floating up and turning, kind of like a Michelangelo baby, And I remember Linda, my wife, coming into the studio, about midnight. She said, are you coming to bed? And I said, well, no, I just got to finish this. She said, well, what is it? I said, well, look. And I flipped this baby floating. She said, so why did you what's that for? I said, I have no idea. But isn't it cool? So I just sat.
My wife said, that's weird.
It's weird.
Just go to bed.
Yeah. Well, that became the beginning of Duet, and it was there.
Was it literally that animation was reused?
Yes, literally that.
Oh, no, that's cool. That's a neat story. So you're saying you were animating the whole Duet and kind of making up the story as you went? Is there a little bit of that?
Well, we did need to plan it out. And so we thumbnailed out the whole thing on little Post-its. Max had a studio above his garage, and Jenny and Max and I worked in there, and we developed this story, which was quite a mind-bending thing that you were thinking of. There's no cut.
Right.
Characters are continually moving. So even though this character's going that way, one screen... Well, I always knew that the boy always had to move screen right to screen left. The girl always screen left to screen right. And they would always do that. And then they would cross. And you could follow them on this, on the phone. You could choose to follow one or the other. And when they cross, there was a moment where they would connect, sometimes briefly, sometimes more. And it was a moment to switch stories. We started thinking of the story. Regina Dugan coined a phrase, it's a double helix of stories. It's instead of a linear story, it's two spiral staircases that are ascending, and you can jump back from one story to the next. And so we really needed to think through that story. I knew where they were going to go, but I didn't think of it so much beginning, middle, and end. I did know that as they went along, though, there was characters' weakness. Mia, the little girl, she's clumsy, but she wants to be a ballerina. How can that happen? And it was in intersecting with this boy's life where he catches her at a moment where she was the most fragile. She had really put herself out there, but she stumbled. How's this girl ever going to make it? There's no dialogue in it, but it's a little moment of grace like that then sends her on her way to become who she's meant to be. And she in turn affects him. And they both become who they're meant to be, and in doing so find one another. So, there was that story just sort of grew, but it was it's funny working with your son. You think that, he's your son, going to see some things exactly the same, but you do not. I found that Max is very different than me. When it comes to solving complex problems, I'm like, okay, this is like super difficult to try to figure out how these characters are going to go. Right. I'm just going to animate it. I'm just going to dive in, and I know, give me a pencil and I can solve anything. And he's like, there's no way. Everybody in the room here has to know as well as you. We need to know now how we're going to plan this whole thing out, and he's a planner, very methodical, and he's also the bridge person that understands CG and hand drawn at the same time, knows my line. And he needed to be the one communicating that, so I gave in to him, and we blocked it all out and did kind of like a pose test of the whole thing, and which then when it came time to animate it, I still changed a heck of a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
Which probably frustrated Max and Jenny to no end, I'm sure.
Well, when I see this short, it looks very straight ahead. Obviously there was planning like you just talked about, but I assume that then you sat down and you just went straight ahead with your animation. Is that true?
Well, I knew where we had to get to, and I had general ideas as to what vehicle I would use for watching the character grow, like a skip, watching the little girl grow by way of a skip. And so I videotaped my granddaughter watching her skip. And you don't do a skip without falling in love with the miracle of a skip. You watch it and you go, wait a second, it's not a run.
Yeah.
It's not a hop. And it's not a walk. It's like all of them, but motivated by joy.
Yeah.
And no one ever taught a kid to skip. It's just a spontaneous combustion. It just boom.
They all know how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I fall in love with that skip, and there's that joy. And once you get that joy, well, then you know that something else has to come after it. So after she skips, all I was thinking about was joy. And I just wanted her to celebrate in some way in the next phase of her growth. And I just put a huge pile of leaves there and let her kick these leaves, and they go flying up in the air. Yeah, I don't even think you've seen that, because that's not on.
It wasn't part of the short that was released.
Yeah, you'll have to see it on the device.
I've seen it. I'll step in and just say that I was at the Animation Summit with you a couple weeks ago when you and your son Max were doing a presentation. And the coolest thing, and this is for right. Tom and for any of the listeners, if you've only seen Duet on YouTube as it's presented as a short, then you really haven't gotten the full experience of what
we've
Glen
only seen
achieved.
Like half of it, right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's right.
Because what Max showed is that, and this is the wonder of the technology and what you created, that double helix, and this is just a blanket thing to cover everything that we're talking talking about. Duet was designed so that you could literally, with the Motorola phone that Google created, you can follow the character by moving in space. You move your phone and it becomes the camera following whichever character you want. You could go off with the girl or you could go off with the boy. The whole story is about boy meets girl. And they have interconnecting points where they go away from each other and then they come back to each other. They're older. They go away from each other. They come back to each other. Now they're older and more mature. And they're falling in love at these connection points. And they're creating relationship. And then there's a dog thrown into it too, which is all over the place. And you can literally follow all of these. So Max at the Animation Summit, when they were doing this panel, he had a camera hooked up and he literally moved around the phone and recorded it on the big screen for us all to see. So I got to see all the stuff that I had no idea how it really worked. And it wasn't until I saw that, and this is for you, Glenn, I was amazed at what you guys achieved, because the short, like you said, it only tells a small part of the story. But when Max did his demo of how it worked, there was a huge story. There was 3 stories, really. A boy's story, a girl's story, and this dog, and it was mind-boggling how many drawings and how much animation was really there in the same linear time frame. It was all happening at the same time.
Well, was that heartbreaking, Glenn, when they put out the short? You're like, only half of the things being seen.
Well, I worked with Max and I and Jenny and our team there worked with a guy from Frame Store, Zach Leiden, as an editor. And he came out, and knowing that we were going to have to do a theatrical version, he was so gracious and kind and patient in the way he tried to keep as much of every shot in there, knowing, I know Glenn's not going to be able to keep all this, but he's got to be the one to let it go. Yeah. I can't be the one. And so we kept whittling it down to just how much do we need. And we ended up with a short that you never would have ever conceived of had you not gone this route.
Yeah.
The way it's presented, it's very seamless. It's a seamless garment. There is no stitching in it. And the way Zach wove it together is really, really beautiful. Yeah. But there's over at least 10,000 because those are the ones we use. I mean, but you know how it is. You do 10 and you keep one. Yeah. And we did thousands of drawings. Sarah Aris was my assistant. Both Sarah and I had our hands in braces by the end of it. And it was absolutely a wonderful experience to do it. But the way that you do that is to believe in the character. You don't think about the drawings. I'm telling you guys, you know this. They're living. Yeah. Like I remember there's one scene where Tosh, the boy, he's supposed to run across the rocks and just get to the tree. And Jenny Rim, our producer, knew that I was way behind. I was never hitting any deadline, ever. And so we've rented a house in Saratoga, and there's a little studio in the garage out back. Jenny was staying there, and John Cars, her husband, would come up times, and then Max was there, and his family come up, and my family. I mean, we were just sort of, that was our home base, but there was a little studio there, and I'd get up at 4 a.m. and animate. Most of it's animated at that time. I really love the quiet. And I remember animating him, and he got to this field. There was only a field and the tree. And all I had to do was just run him across the field and get to the tree, and I'd be done. And I got to this one drawing, and I drew his foot, like taking a step straight towards the tree. And as soon as I drew it, something in me just said, he does not want to go to that tree. I was like, no, but you don't understand. You have to go to the tree.
The deadline wants him to go to the tree.
It's like, no, okay, I'm gonna. So in that same drawing, and I think I showed it at our talk. Tony, you probably saw that. Where I think you saw it. Yeah. Okay, where he starts turning away, and I just let him go into the field, into perspective, and then I discovered that as I'm starting, and I have no idea what he's doing. I'm just drawing him running into the field, and there's this what I thought was a rock, and as I'm animating it, I'm also animating the background. Everything is moving, so it's like Winsor McKay with Gertie. I mean, you are just drawing, and it's all on the same paper too. The background, the character, everything is on the same paper.
Oh man!
So he's running, and I'm drawing the grass, and there's a little smudge in the grass. And I'm thinking, what is that? I mean, I made it, but it's like, you're just living it. This is happening, So I'm flipping, and it's like, well, is that a rock? Or no, it's actually a tree, and I'm drawing this little tree. It's a log, and I animate a little bit more. No, it's actually a fallen down tree, And, oh, this is something he does every morning. He runs on this thing and he hangs on the branch and he flips around it was a complicated little action that I just hung on and watched him do this little somersault around the root and then leap down into the tall grass. And now he's rolling in the grass. And hey, I don't even have to draw him anymore. He's hidden in the grass. I'll just have birds fly up and eventually he gets to the tree. And about that time, Jenny Rim came into the little studio and I said, Jenny, look. And I flipped this whole scene and she looked at it, she just said, Glenn? And it was in the way she said it was like, you're insane. You were supposed to just get him to the tree. But why did you do all of that? And at the same time, it's so wonderful. Of course, the boy chose that. And it was, now she says she's just really thankful that I didn't allow the deadline to stop me from letting the character be who they are.
That's great.
Yeah.
But that shows kind of the freedom that you were given on this too, which is, I still kind of am amazed at what they were doing there, what you were involved with there at Google. There was this large corporation that allowed artists to just create their own vision, their own story. And now I'm so excited about this because Duet is now up for possible nomination for an Academy Award for Best Animated Short, with you as the director, the creator, the animator, the auteur of this film. How does that all feel for you now that it's all coming together? This thing that was this personal project that you were given license to go away and do, the world is going to be looking at this and considering it as an Oscar contender. How does that feel for you?
Well, it's pretty amazing to me because you know how these things are. You work and you finish your drawing and you forget that, oh, that's right, there was a purpose. This was actually to give to others.
Yeah.
Right.
This wasn't all just like about a selfish thing of me having fun drawing. And yesterday was the day. Yesterday was the day that people saw the interactive version. And it was unlike any day I've ever experienced in animation, because we got wonderful reactions from films like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and such, and where people connected with it, but they connected with it as a group, as a large audience, people. The responses we were getting were from people who did not expect this animation to arrive on their Android, and it will be on all Androids. And suddenly it's there, but it's intimate. It's like they're in bed. This one person somehow they're sending us these texts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like this one is saying, last night I experienced a moment of pure wonder. It felt like it was meant for me. Sick in bed, still coughing and sneezing at 3 a.m., I absent-mindedly checked my smartphone. To my astonishment, a tiny blue spark appeared on my screen. Tapping it, my phone became a window into a miniature world worthy of Pixar. A lovingly hand-drawn boy and girl literally danced through life, growing to become the couple you see above. I followed them around the darkness of my room, eager to see the course of their lives unfold through my tiny window. It felt like magic, for a moment anyhow.
Wow.
Well, that's a long tour. But no, it's beautiful.
That is great.
Somebody else asked if they could use the music so that they could get married to it.
Really?
Another couple said they saw Duet and they felt like it was a message, an approval of God's plan for them, that they were going to have a baby, and the next morning she took a pregnancy test and she was pregnant.
No way.
And they were sending us this was all yesterday. And then so many little, but they're so personal. They're intimate moments.
Well, Glenn, I mean, you're part of a whole new generation. You're experiencing something that really has never been experienced before, because we all grew up we make this film and it's released and we're a cog in a wheel. We just do our part. But you created a very personal, intimate story that was personal to you. And now, through the wonder of this new technology, that's what I think is so cool. It's released yesterday on all the Motorola devices that Google has, and boom, you're here. You're experiencing a whole new way that people are interacting with your work. It's never been done before. I think that's so cool.
Well, I didn't know what it was going to be like. I didn't know that this was how it was going to happen. But it's taken me by surprise, and it's just reminded me that this whole idea that as an artist, what you really want is to connect and touch people. I think that's really the goal, is to touch people, and to be able to have animation that's in the palm of somebody's hand. means you are really connecting in a very, very intimate, personal way. I just love the potential of that.
Well, and with social networking, then they can also share that with their friends, and they can tweet you and personally, and I mean, all that side of it is really exciting too that you couldn't do before. Glenn, we have a Bancroft Brothers fan page, and we have asked all of our fans that are even bigger fans of yours if they have some questions for you. So I wanted to read a couple and just get, I know we're running out of time, but want to get as many in there as we can. I'm going to start with one that's actually not a question because it's pretty inspirational. Steve Hawthorne, he wrote, mine is not much of a question, but instead I have a recent tell. I had the privilege to meet Glenn during his talk in Bristol. As his words told his story, I was humbled by not only his art, and who isn't, but also his humility. After the talk, as everyone left the room, somebody simply said thank you, and Glenn paused, and he grabbed the fan, he took him aside, and asked him about his own work and his interests. For allowing me to bear witness to this act, I thank you, Glenn.
No, that's really sweet. Thank you.
And that I had to read that because it really sums you up. I mean, all the wonderful things you've heard about Glenn that are non-art driven, everybody out there needs to know they're all true. He's a wonderful person.
Thank you.
I'm going to read one more and I'll let Tony do one. Chad Fry, he's a good friend of ours, and you know him, Glenn. Yeah. He says, and this is just him being stupid. When you were a kid, did you run around and leave a dotted line behind you when you were running around the neighborhood?
Oh, man, I remember in the middle of our yard digging a foxhole in our newly planted grass. And what a dumb kid, because Dad's studio was like overlooking the yard. Big glass window, and Dad's drawing, and he's looking out. And this is the family circus, Dad, you know. And here's my brother Neil and I, and we're digging a foxhole in the middle of it. And suddenly the studio bursts open, and Dad's got a baseball bat. And we just run! And we just ran up the mountain. It took off. I mean, I'm sure Dad would never have done anything, but it was the scariest moment.
Right. Just to scare you.
I mean, we didn't leave dotted lines. They were speed lines.
Oh, that story makes me want to have boys. I have 4 girls. But yeah, scaring boys, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
You know what a lot of people ask continually is about, there's always this feeling that Glen Keane has a magical pencil. And back when we were working together at Disney, you had the Blaisdell that you used. I think it was a German pencil, but they don't make it anymore. And it was interesting at the talk that you did at the summit last couple weeks ago about your short, Duet. You talked about trying out a ton of different pencils. I'm sure people would love to know, what's the pencil that you use to animate Duet with?
We tried many pencils, because I found out that all the pencils that I love, it's an expensive process, and they keep stopping. They don't make them because it's expensive. And this was so important that we had to have a nice jet black line that was going to show up. And so Jenny searched far and wide and found a pencil in Japan, the Mitsubishi pencil. And as soon as I found it, it's a 10B Mitsubishi.
10B.
Wow.
It was like, just when you drew with it, it was like butter. I mean,
like butter.
There was calories to the line. I mean, you get fat when you draw with it. It was
juicy.
Yeah, and then actually this summer I was in Paris, and they had a Miyazaki exhibit, and they had his pencils that he'd used. Sure enough, it was the Mitsubishi, the same kind. Yeah, his whole career he's used that.
Is that the kind where you buy the lead separate and put it in? That kind of a...
No, it's just an awesome pencil. It's wood. Okay. And, yeah.
Well, their stock just went up.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to sell a few of those. It's funny how many times we get asked. I mean, we do, you do. What pencil do you use? It's such a big question. And I know when I was working with Mark Ken, he was my animation mentor for many years. He didn't care about the pencil. He always would actually change pencils so he wouldn't get too addicted to one. He was kind of just the opposite, where he would say, "Oh, it's not about the pencil. It's about the drawings." You know?
Yeah. Mark Ken. What a
yeah, I know. You know what he's Mark.
He's a purist.
He is. So I got to ask one from Tyrone Barnes. Tyrone probably asked about 80 questions. So we picked one. And this one's an unusual one. Would you consider starting a YouTube channel dedicated to watching you draw? I think I'd learned so much from that alone. He said that, but I would too. Now that you've got into social networking, and this is where I'm going to take the question, is do you have other things you want to kind of experiment with? Stuff kind of like that.
Well, I would love to do that and just animate for the joy of animating and share with people. I know that it's really important for me to understand, the dynamics of who I am. And the dynamics of who I am is there's two important parts of me as an artist. There's the part who's the mentor, the teacher, the one who wants to share and can't help but share what I'm doing and learning. I've always been that way. But that only works if I'm actually making something. I've got to be making art. I've got to be animating. That's the comet. The tail is the sharing. And so that's the dilemma for me is I need to be actually moving forward right now and figuring out what's the next thing. I've just come from a long period of really sharing and expressing to others what's happened with me. I mean, here, that's why I'm doing this with you guys.
Oh, it's not out of love?
It is. It is the love of sharing it. Because somebody shared it with me, and Frank and Ollie and Eric, they took the time. And I do the same thing. Yeah. But anyway, I would love to do that. I just need to do it at the right time when I feel like, okay, I've got that comet is burning, and there'll come another period where I can actually do a lot more sharing.
Well, and keep going with that if you can real quick, because I know we have a lot of people that have asked, so what's next with Glenn? Is he going to start a studio? Does he have a feature film that he wants to make? Can you comment on that?
Well, yes and yes. I mean, I've got a studio, Glen Keane Productions. We have a little house that we are renting in Hollywood that allows just a very small team just to start to grow. That's where I'm at right now. And we have transformed different bedrooms in this house into little story rooms that we can start to develop a few ideas that we have. And we're looking for the right partner who wants to go where we want to go. I love the experience of doing Duet.
Yeah.
When I think of Duet, I see it as the first fruit that fell from Glen Keane Productions' tree. And there's a taste, there's a quality to it. There's something about it it's about goodness, it's about beauty, it's about having a purpose to your life, and there's a sweetness to it that I love. And whatever the new stories are, it should have qualities of that in some way. I love the idea that Duet is kind of more of a visual poem. I feel like there's much more freedom of expression that way. I know that I will never leave behind the character animation and the humor and the drama of storytelling that I've learned at Disney. I just feel like there's not as many walls that we need to respect. There's a lot more freedom for telling that in the long form. And so I am developing at least two projects.
Great.
That's great. And I know all of our listeners are really big fans, not only of you, but also of 2D animation. So I guess the next question is, do you see it, whatever it is that you go into, feature or otherwise, is it going to be 2D or 3D? Do you have a preference?
Well, I'm drawn to 2D because that's what I love to do. Though my experience on Tangled was I can really contribute to CG as well. And I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of what we could have done.
Yeah.
I mean, we just barely touched it. And it was really beautiful, but we could do something really awesome with that. And I got to say, I feel exactly the same way with the hand drawn. We haven't even seen the potential of where it can go. And so I see us moving down both those paths.
Great.
That's great.
And okay, along those lines with 2D, because this is another question that I know Tony and I get, and pretty much anybody in animation does. Aveya Verma asked, what advice can you give to a new aspiring 2D animator who wishes to work on 2D animation, but it's in an industry where there's not much of a demand for it anymore? I mean, what do you tell those students?
Well, I believe that there's no way that hand-drawn will end because of a very thin slice of time that's almost invisible when you look at the scope of history.
Right.
Drawing and art making for tens of thousands of years. We've done this. And right here, there's a few executives that say, I think that we just don't want to do hand-drawn. Like, oh, yeah, well, I don't think that that's going to stop the birth of people who are gifted to express themselves in drawing. I mean, a pencil to me is the most amazing, sophisticated design instrument. I mean, you think about it, you hold it. And it's in your hand. It's directly connected to you physically. And that connects somewhere deep in not just your mind, but your heart. And you are expressing those thoughts and those feelings, and it's narrowing down to the end of that piece of wood into a point. and you are expressing, you are taking all this that's inside of you, the vulnerable part of you, the passionate part of you, and you're expressing it in a line. And as you make that line, it's kind of like the seismograph of your soul. You're expressing something, and there has to be a future for that kind of expression. And as I say that, I understand that the computer is that same tool for other people, animators who don't draw, but they found a way to use that through computer animation. So I would really tell the person who asked this question that you have to really look inside your own heart and ask yourself what brings you the deepest joy, and put yourself in a place where you can learn from somebody else, because it's really about discovering it and learning it. And it's slow. You don't learn it today or tomorrow. It's bit by bit by bit, and there's hours and hours of studying and figurative drawing and going to classes, learning sculpture, copying artists. I learned mostly from dead guys. I'd check out books on Modigliani and Degas, and I tried to draw like them, and they always lifted me up to a new level, and my animation was affected by it. So I would just keep going forward. Don't listen to anybody that's saying, there's no future in it. There is.
Amen. I love that. And Tom and I are big supporters of 2D animation. We want to see it continue going. And as somebody that has been there beside you, watched you draw from time to time, the way you hold a pencil, it's like a lightning rod, and lightning and energy comes out of that. And it's just been amazing. I'm going to let that be our last note here. Thank you so very much, Glenn, for your time today and being on our podcast.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Tony and Tom. I really wish that I could have spent like 12 hours just talking with you guys, because there's so much to share. So we will have to do this again.
Yeah, believe me, we would have liked that too.
Yeah, I know. We really touched on we just skipped over so many things we could have talked about, and we could definitely get deeper. We'll do that again sometime. We just thank you for your time.
Yeah, if we can get a chance to do a part 2, we will, and we'll just try and get you again sometime.
For anybody listening, make sure you go onto a Motorola device, experience Duet for yourself. It's live now. If you haven't seen the short itself, the directorial cut, I guess we're calling it, or the short that's up for an Academy Award, please check that out online too. Follow Glenn. He's on Facebook now. He's on all over the media now. So.
He's on Tumblr, Twitter. He's out there. Love it.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks for reminiscing with us. This has been the Tom and Tony, the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast.
And we're sponsored by TaughtByPro.com. And this is our quote, Tony, is taken right from Glen Keane that we say every week. What is it? Animate from the heart.
Cool.